generations. We want to show our respect for their contributions and recognize the role of the treaty making in which is now Ontario. So we are going to start off with a roll call. And after we do the roll call, if everybody could please mute their microphones, that would be wonderful. Grant, are you on there?
I am here. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Of course, we have Member Johnson present, but I'll do a roll call in alphabetical order. Member Beattie. Member Brady.
He's online, but he can't speak at the moment.
Okay. Member Bilsma. Member Bilsma. Member Clark.
Good morning, Niagara.
Member Peterson.
Present.
Member Cridland. Member Fior.
Good morning.
Member Foster.
I am here.
Member Halinga.
Good morning from Port Colborne.
Member Houston is not available today.
Right.
Member Ingrao. Member Ingrao. Member K-Wall.
I'm here.
Member McKenzie.
I'm here. Good morning.
Member Metcalf. Member Metcalf. Member Rapley. Rapley. I think I heard a present there.
Did you?
Maybe it was just background noise. Member Rapley, are you there? Perhaps not. Okay. Member Shurton.
Present.
Member Smith.
Yes.
Member Steele.
Has
Here.
joined the meeting.
Member Woodhouse. Member Woodhouse. And Member Wright.
Here.
Excellent. And someone just joined the meeting as well?
Rick Brady has also joined.
Thank you, Rick. Is there anybody else that just joined and did not hear their name? Okay, we're ready to rock and roll. And before we start, we got some housekeeping here. Again, everybody, please mute all your microphones. When we get feedback, even on your phones, when we get feedback, it's very hard to hear people when it's their turn to speak. When you want to speak, you either wave, or if you're on the phone, just say your name. And if I don't get it, just get my attention at the end. The voting is the same. Instead of saying all in favor, I'll ask if any is opposed. If I hear too many opposes, then I'm going to do a roll call so we can get an accurate vote count. Grant, just before we start, could you please explain to everybody when they get their meeting invites, please? Because I understand there's been some confusion when people go to log in the mornings, they can't find their meeting invite on their emails.
Sure, sorry. So what happens when you accept on an Outlook, when you accept your meeting invite, it automatically transfers to your calendar, and then the meeting invite is no longer in your inbox. So to join the meeting in the morning, you actually have to go into your calendar on Outlook and click on the meeting, and all of the login information then pops up. So there's been some difficulty over the last while with people realizing that and getting their information. I think I just got a message as well that Member Ingrao has joined the meeting.
Perfect. Good morning, John. All right, so I'm adding you now to our list. Perfect. So before we start also, I just want to let the public know we record all meetings and that they are placed on the website shortly afterwards. At the end of the open portion of this meeting, however, we're going to stop the recording before we go in camera. And the recording will not resume when we come out of camera, because the meeting will adjourn immediately, and there will be no direction to staff, so there'll be nothing for the public record anyways. So may I please have approval of the agenda? Moved by Member Beattie, second by Member Brady. Any opposed? Seeing none, hearing nobody wants to speak, it's carried. Are there any declarations of interest on the agenda we have in front of you today? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes. Moved by Member Clark, second by Member Kuhn-Peterson, that we approve the minutes of May 21st, 2020. Is there any discussion or any opposition? Seeing none, and I just want to also mention that Member Metcalf has joined us. Good morning, Member Metcalf.
Good morning.
All right, so now we're going down to correspondence. Before we start with that, Chandra has received some wonderful correspondence from the minister. I'll let Chandra actually explain it all. So Chandra, could you please share your wonderful news after you unmute yourself? Can you unmute your microphone?
I did. Good morning, everyone. Late yesterday, we heard the news from the province that Minister McLeod is starting her opening tour, and she wants to come to Niagara, and they would like to pick Balls Falls as their first location. So that tour, as of 7 o'clock yesterday, has been confirmed. She's coming with our local member of provincial parliament, Mr. Oosterhoff from Grimsby, and the visit is scheduled for Saturday morning around 9 o'clock. Brenda and myself will be attending along with staff. I think it's a good news that they're starting with Balls Falls, and NPCA's areas are recognized. So thank you for all your work and support who has, helped us over the year to build this up. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Chandra. So now we're on to correspondence. 4A is correspondence from Conservation Ontario dated May 28, 2020 to Ministers of Finance, Infrastructure, Communities and Environment and Climate Change regarding conservation authorities implementation agents for stimulating a more resilient, sustainable and green Canadian economy. The recommendation we have here is the distribution to federal members of parliament in NPCA jurisdiction for their support. So right now I have Member Cridlin and second by Member Fiore that we follow that direction. Is there any discussion or opposition? No, seeing none. Thank you very much. It's been carried. And good morning,
Chair.
Dave Bisma. Oh, sorry, Member Cridlin.
No, thank you. And again, it's just the technical part of it. Again, the letter is phenomenal. I noticed in the letter, it certainly references health in a very big way. And I don't know where the appropriate opportunity is to raise this to a Minister of Health. I think it's a build, but they do highlight the savings. So again, I'm not sure how that happens, but I'll just make the comment and then make your motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I just also want to welcome Dave Bilsma, who just joined us as well. So the recommendation is distribution to the MPs in the NPCA jurisdiction. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, it's been carried. 4B, correspondence from AMO, dated May 19, 2020 to the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks and its Reconsideration Authority's next step. This is just to receive, and I have Member Foster, seconded by Member Halinga. Is there any discussion or opposition? Seeing none, then it's carried. We're going to 4C, correspondence from Conservation Ontario dated June 3rd, 2020 to the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks and its Reconsideration Authorities for next steps. So it is moved by Member Foster, second by Member Halinga. Any discussion? Any opposition? I keep looking at the screen, folks, but I'm not seeing anything, so I'm just going to carry on unless I hear differently. And that is approved. So we're on to presentations. We have none. Delegations is next. We have none. So now we're on to oh, sorry.
Brenda?
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
1 second.
Bruce?
Yes. If I may take a minute, I just wanted to bring the attention of the board a new message from the NPCA on its website. I'll take a second to read it. I think it's important. The NPCA recognizes that diversity is a source of strength and believes that there should be zero tolerance towards racism, prejudice, and discrimination within our organization, conservation areas, and watershed community as a whole. Our success in meeting our mandate and mission is dependent upon working in collaboration with our partners in conservation. We are committed to ensuring every individual in the NPCA watershed, regardless of age, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, or disability, has the opportunity to connect with nature and conservation, to take action towards protecting water and biodiversity while working in collaboration towards sustainable communities in ways that are appropriate and meaningful to them. And I'd like to thank the staff for putting this together. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Mackenzie, for pointing that out. Erica did an amazing job, Chandra, and I think we can all agree the staff did a wonderful job putting that message out there. Again, everybody, please mute your microphones. So number 7, consent items. Report number FA2820. This is regarding the Lakewood Beach development. And I understand this is the Save Wainfleet group. And this is to receive, but I just want to give some highlights here. Chandra, Dave, and Darren met with these folks who belong to that group, Save Wainfleet. And this report is in response to that meeting and their delegation. My understanding is Dave would really like to give a bit of an overview to this because we really feel this issue is important and we just want it for the public consumption. So is David Deluce on the, there you are. Do you want to put your video on or is that okay not to?
No, that's fine. Sorry, I was having connectivity issues, so if I drop off, I'll just give me a few minutes. But thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I think it was important to just give the board a quick synopsis of this whole the Lakewood Beach development. There's a lot of history to this development. It predates most of the staff at the NPCA. It's since the late 2000s. This development has been in various stages of proposal. It's gone to the former OMB several times. It has recently gone to the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal, the LPAT, specifically for the condo. In all cases, the developer was given approvals at those various formats. So it's been slowly and gradually proceeding forward. The NPCA has been involved at all steps of the way. And we've been making sure that we've properly reviewed the applications and provided the appropriate advice to the township in making their decisions on these applications. So where the application stands at this moment is the developers in the final stages of putting all their conditions together to be able to proceed with registering the condominium. And at that point, that would give them the green light to go ahead and start constructing the actual condominium. So for the NPCA, the only condition we have left to clear is just reviewing the draft development agreement with the township and the developer. Other conditions that we had required were addressed through the permits that we had issued back in 2018. So right now the ball is in the developer's court. We have issued the developer a letter just advising that their permits with us do expire at the end of this year. And that as part of any updates for those permits or an extension for those permits, they will be required to update their various technical studies, the floodplain analysis, the coastal engineers report, and update any drawings that result from new information in those studies. So thank you, Madam Chair. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Absolutely. Are there any questions for David right now before we receive the report? Member Clark? Unmute yourself.
Thank you for the reminder. Can I just ask from staff then, what is the responsibility for the NPCA in terms of approvals of this type of application? Because the majority of it seems to be more municipal.
David?
Madam Chair, that is correct. This is a largely municipally driven process. You're dealing with official plan amendments, even a regional official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, plan of condominium. So those are all municipal processes. Our role is basically a commenting agency. We do have a little bit of regulatory role because this is a property river Lake Erie. And the bulk of the condominium units, the individual townhomes, are outside of any NPCA regulated area. So there's about 2 or 3 that are within a regulated area that we would have direct say over through our permit system, but all the others are outside of our area of regulation.
So when it comes to the proximity, Madam Chair, of the properties to the waterfront, that is a municipal decision?
David?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's both municipal and NPCA, because as you get closer to the water, then our regulation kicks in. You fall within one of the, basically the Lake Erie erosion hazard, and the dwellings were situated beyond the hazard. They made sure that they confirmed where the hazard limit was and sited the dwellings just outside of that. They still have some shoreline protection works that are anticipated under our work permit, which I understand they haven't completed yet, but the municipality also would have say in where the dwellings are located through their zoning bylaw. But in terms of proximity to the shoreline, they would look to us for that advice.
Member Clark?
Thank you. And so the next question that was in that Wainfleet thing was about a toad habitat to be redefined. What's our role in that?
Madam Chair, our role, we don't really have a strong role in that. That is a process from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. So they are the administrators of the Endangered Species Act, and Fowler's toad is protected under that legislation. So it's up to the MOECP to determine whether or not the Fowler's toad habitat needs to be redefined. And I think it was mentioned in the staff report that the developer does have what's known as an overall benefit permit to basically relocate the Fowler's toad during construction. And in that permit, that defines the extent of the habitat. And that permit lapses, or I should say expires in 2027. It has a really long approval date on it. And again, that's a provincial process. That's not our process.
Thank you. That's what I thought. And the last question that I had was with regards to item 5 in the letter that came in from the Wainfleet group talking about the area of influence for provincially significant wetlands being reduced to 30 meters. And I'm not aware that that was the case. I thought the 120 meter was a provincial requirement.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. The our regulation is very clear that for provincially significant wetlands, the area of influence is 120 meters. Our policy treats development proposals between 30 and 120 meters a little bit less stringently than we do for developments within 30 meters, but we still have the regulatory authority on PSWs out to 120 meters.
Member Clark?
Thank you. I appreciate the responses.
Thank you. And I see that Member Rapley has joined us today. Thank you very much, Mr. Rapley. Any other questions for 7A of the lake? Thank you. Thank you. And
I had trouble getting in, and just got in.
Thank you. It's nice to see you. Okay, Member Smith.
Yeah, thank you. So I again Save Wainfleet document that we're reviewing. I note that the NPCA permits expire in December of this year, so in 5 or 6 months. I'm wondering, what is the process then for extensions? Is it just a matter of they come in and apply for extensions, or is it basically the whole process starts again at that time?
Dave, process?
Madam Chair, you do have to make a request for an extension, and in this case, we've asked them to give us at least 3 months notice, because that does give us time to review the request. It's not exactly like starting the process all over, but it does open the door to look at the conditions of the permit and to see if those conditions are still appropriate or if additional information is needed, if something has changed in the last 2 years that would require new information or an updated condition. So those are factors that get reviewed as part of an extension request.
Is there a way that we can give these citizens good peace of mind that if those extensions were requested, that we would, and we might do this all the time. So, and I'll tell you exactly what's happened is the citizens group asked me, shared with me the information that the shoreline protections that were put in place by the developer have since all washed away because of the really high water year on Lake Erie. So the shoreline protections that were developed didn't work and are gone. Do we actually go out and review that kind of stuff? Because their concern is that extension, they'll put back the same shoreline extension protection measures, which are ineffective because the dynamics of Lake Erie has changed. Do we reassess that?
Good question, Dave.
Madam Chair, yes, that in our letter to the developer to give them a heads up on their the permit lapsing later this year, we've advised them that they will have to update their coastal engineer report and their floodplain study. So through that update, that will look at, one, are the original assumptions that they made in the first report back in 2010 still valid? And also would look at, are the recommended measures that they were proposing back in 2010, are those still valid? So that essentially is what we're asking the developers to make sure that the studies they provided will actually address the issue.
Good, and that would in 2010 then.
Okay, you were cutting in and out there a little bit. So Dave, did you get that whole question? It's going to be by today's standards, not by 2010.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I did hear the question, and yes, it would be looked at in today's context, not 10 years ago.
Okay, Member Smith?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So any other comments or questions? Member Clark? And, let's go with Member Mackenzie first, please. He's the first time speaker, and then we'll go back to Member Clark. Member Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. My question's to Dave. Dave, we've all seen videos of houses falling into different parts or different Great Lakes with these high water levels. And I'm wondering in this area, because of possible erosion or historic erosion rates, in 20 years from now, will the homeowners of this community, if it's built, be coming to agencies like the NPCA and saying help because our homes are under threat because of the eroding shoreline? Thank you.
Dave?
Through you, Madam Chair, I guess that's a little bit of a difficult question to answer with complete confidence. I mean, we're talking 20 years out, but the purpose of doing the coastal reports when a development is proposed along a shoreline like Lake Erie, and there's no existing protection, the purpose is to make sure that whatever protection method they're designing is going to be appropriate for the, I'd have to look up in the guidelines, but it's beyond 20 years in terms of the time frame. That in this case, the shoreline protection measures that were proposed because of the Fowler's Toad habitat were not your typical shore wall or armored abutment. They were more natural measures. But again, just want to emphasize that the dwellings were located beyond the Lake Erie erosion hazard limit. And that was studied through our Lake Erie Shoreline Management Plan. And our engineer could better describe, but I think that goes out to either 50 or 70 years in terms of recession rate on the erosion. So in 20 years, are there going to be homeowners complaining about their homes being washed out? Probably not, assuming that the erosion control measures or shore protection measures are installed appropriately. And yeah, that's what I can say about that.
Member Mackenzie?
Thank you. I think this is something that we all need to be concerned about, no matter what Great Lake we're talking about, is if there's a possibility of homes being lost or to changing lake levels and changing climatic conditions, we have to be very cautious. And I'm glad that staff have dealt with this in depth and will continue to look at it, because we don't need more of what we're seeing down at Rondo or on the shores of Lake Huron and parts of Haldimand. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see any other first-time speakers, so I'm going to go. Oh, sorry, Member Cridlin.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Again, much more general than what's on the table, but maybe through to the CAO, maybe there's something again more broad when we start to think about the Great Lakes and the erosion and the future. So again, maybe drawing experience from other CAs around any kind of general monitoring we could consider, or maybe staff could bring something back that's very general and we could consider it for future budgets. Maybe I'll just put that out there. Thank you.
Chandra, would you like to reply to that? You'll have to unmute yourself, please.
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Member Copeland. That's a very good point. Generally, I would say that managing the risk associated with natural hazards of flooding and erosion is well within the mandate and primary roles of conservation authorities, and many conservation authorities in Ontario have fulfilled that role through the development of comprehensive erosion management plans for the shoreline and restoration plans, working with their partner municipalities. So for NPCA, as we consider updating the shoreline management plan that we have in next year, I think what we need to do as part of that, the plan is planned, it provides direction and still technically sound. What we need to do is to look at monitoring the erosion along the shoreline and looking at developing a plan to remediate that. And I think it works in many different ways, especially if there are development issues, along the shoreline from before when conservation authorities came to play. This is an opportunity to address that. You can work with both on public land and work with private land owners to find solutions, address the erosion issues. However, in that process, the landowner has to agree, and there are various mechanisms that we are deploying. When I was at TRCA, you can bring that land in public ownership or work with the landowner on long-term commitments that land will be protected, as is. So there are various mechanisms to do that. I suggest, yes, I think that's a very good suggestion. We should look into looking at updating the shoreline plan, and as part of that, looking at developing erosion monitoring and remediation program. It will take time because you can use the 2010 plan that we have as a baseline of what your shoreline looked like, and then you can, once you do monitoring in the current state, you can go back to the plan and see what changes have occurred and where your pinpoints are and where you need to do remediation. So leave it with us. I think if you give us that direction, it's a very good direction. I've been thinking about that. I would be happy to work with staff to look into that.
Thank you. So no further questions, Member Cridlin?
So I just wondered if that needs
Sure.
anything formal, then I'd make a motion if that's appropriate.
Okay, I'll come to you at the end. Okay, thank you. And I don't see any of the first-time speakers. I'm going to go to second-time speaker, Member Clark, please. Everyone else, please shut off your microphones. Go ahead, Member Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So given the recent changes in high lake levels that we've been seeing for the last 2 to 3 years, the high wind events and the prevalence of storm surges from those wind events, should not the NPCA be leading some type of review as to what the Lake Erie erosion shoreline setback should be? It's to talk about remediation after the damage. That's the most costly option that we would have, that any government would have. It would be far less expensive if we were to assess the impacts of the rising lake level, the winds, and say, based on that, the setback should be this. So does the NPCA have the authority to do that type of review? Is that something that we have to coordinate with the province or with Conservation Ontario and the municipalities? I'm just worried that as I'm seeing it across the province, most municipalities are just like Chandra just said, we're talking about remediation. So we're repairing the trails that are along the lakeshore after the storm that wipes them out. And then the next storm comes back and wipes them out 2 years later. And that's what we're seeing in Hamilton. So I'm just wondering whether or not we should be looking at the proximity of these new developments to the waterfront.
Chandra?
Through you, Madam Chair, there's MNR guidance on the hazard limits. I'll get Darren to speak to that. Darren?
Just unmute yourself, Darren. Thank you.
Sorry
Good
about
morning.
that. Good morning. Through you, Madam Chair. I apologize for that. I hit
No worries.
and it muted back up again. So my technical difficulties.
That's okay.
Member Clark, that is a great point. And as Chandra had said, there is the MNR technical guidelines. Our current shoreline management plans are 2010 vintage. Usually they last for about 25 years. MNR's technical guidelines for designing shoreline management plans has not changed. And the current standard on both Great Lakes, we have not reached the 100-year elevation for the lake levels that are set out by MNRF. So even going back to review the actual technical aspects of those guidelines, they are still the same. Now, is there something else where you can say, despite what's there, we do have increased winds, we do have increased storm surges? That's something we could look at, but the actual technical reports themselves, doing them now or they'd be no different than what they were from 2010.
And if I may add to that, sorry to interrupt here, Member Clark. I just want to, what Darren is saying is correct. And I think how in the technical community, some of the engineers will say, these are new climate change risks and threats, and how some of them are addressing is you can't get the numbers right, but create a freeboard. So if you have a hazard limit, you create a 10%, 50% freeboard to accommodate those extra risks or risk from extreme weather, I would say. And those are the things that we as staff need to go back and look at, what's going on, where is our hazard limit, what else we need to do to consider these recent changes or climate change impacts.
Thank you, Member Clark.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate Mr. McKenzie's commentary in terms of the technical requirements from MNR has not changed, nor given the speed at which the MNR moves, do I anticipate it would be changed in my lifetime. So my concern is, do we wait for the MNR to catch up bureaucratically with technical data, or do we begin advocating to the MNR that the lake levels, the winds, these things are changing, and perhaps we should be looking at, the last 5 years of damaging storms, seeing what damage occurred to the shoreline, and then reassessing the proximity of new developments to the shoreline based on that. Mr. McKenzie, is that possible outside of a technical assessment?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is actually a very good question, because we have to look back to the regulation, which states that we can only regulate to what our Lake Erie, or what our shoreline management plan states. And it comes down to a legality of what we are legally allowed to regulate to. That'll be something we can look into to see if we can say, you know what, this is what the shoreline says. However, based on this scientific data, we anticipate we should be adding this percentage to those lines. That's just the fine tuning to see that can we do that.
Yeah, so to be clear, Madam Chair, I'm not asking for us to change our regulations. I'm not asking us to change our current standards. I'm asking us to look at what has occurred in, say, the last 5 years, and from that, project some of the storm damage that may occur in the future, and then go to the M&R and say, should we be now looking at, or other conservation authorities also, should we be looking at the setback from the shorelines on the Great Lakes based on the information that we've now gathered? So it's more of a research and advocacy project than it is changing the regulations. We have to convince the M&R that they can't wait for 25 to 50 years to look at this, because it's going to continue to be an issue during that 25 to 50 year period. Am I making sense, or am I just smoking something that's now legal?
It makes total sense to me, and it's something I'll look into to see what we can, what's the best option for us on those type of things.
And Madam Chair, that's all I'm asking at this point, not by a formal direction or resolution. Okay. Let's just explore
definitely
how we can take a leadership role on ensuring that future developments along the lake shores are being protected from storm surges.
Okay. Thank you. And I saw Member Foster waving. Are you wanting to speak? Okay. Can everybody else shut their mics off, please? Member Brady, can you shut your mic off, please? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Johnson. So I've been involved with this file, I guess, for a long time as well. And I would say 5 to 6 years ago, we were all complaining that the Great Lakes were too low. And in fact, I was involved with a number of AMO committees that, particularly the mayors in and around the Great Lakes were all vehemently complaining that everything was low. Now they seem to be at their high level mark. So I'm listening to Member Clark. I mean, the lakes do tend to rise and fall. I mean, there's a cyclical thing that goes along with them. I'm not so sure how far we need to go as a conservation authority down the road with this. I certainly am a believer that climate change is going into play, but I'm not exactly, well, I don't know if anybody knows what the effect is on the lakes. I mean, even, the way that they deposit waters and stuff out through the St. Lawrence Seaway. So, I'm just curious as to how far we really need to go as a conservation authority with this. I mean, with everything else that we have going, is this really a quasi priority for us? That's just my general question. So.
Okay, thank you. I think Chandra wants to chime in on this, but I believe it was just to explore it and see whether or not we did have a role. So go ahead, Chandra.
This is a tough, but again, I think as a conservation authority responsible for shoreline hazard management, which is one of our mandates, we are seeing the impacts every day. We are seeing impacts of high winds and water. At the end of the day, what comes out of it and what we need to do, whether it's research and working with M&R to look at how we make decisions, or actually fixing things and remediating and working with landowners, or making sure there's enough room for water and wind to do their work, and there are enough setbacks so outcome could be anything. However, the current issue we have is, yes, lakes are going up and down. They're dynamic systems. We also have high winds. We have climate change. There have been enough studies and guidance to look at, what's going on along our lakes and shorelines. I think at the end of the day, it comes to what kind of management approaches you want to take to protect people and property and let the nature do its thing. So something needs to be done. We can't sit back because I think people are being impacted. We know this. When lakes get higher, we have impacts. When lakes get lower, we have habitat impacts. When lakes get higher, we have community impacts. So we need to do something about it. This is where I leave, but I think personally, this is not an issue that a conservation authority can sit back and say, okay, this is someone else's job. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Member Foster?
No, that's fine. I'm,
Okay.
I just want to make sure that if we're going down the road with this, and we start expending resources and with all the myriad of other things that we have going, that we really need to be in this area. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And it was a good discussion, everybody. I would like to get this received, this report, Dave's report received, and also go back to Member Cridlin. Oh, sorry, Member Fiore, is that you?
Yes, yeah, quick.
Oh, I recognize your voice. Good.
Yeah, thank you. No, I put my hand up. I don't know if if it registered though on the software. So just
no, it doesn't. Sorry.
To this point, I'm really glad that Member Clark brought this up and specifically to the research and advocacy piece, because I do think that it is important that as a conservation authority, and while I understand that there's a lot of resources required for this, how can we bring forth objective and reliable information about the impact of climate change on our community, on our watershed, and have that shoreline be a piece of that. And so it would be used not only to advocate to MNR, but also to inform municipalities, lower and upper tier, and developers, and even residents who are considering maybe building close to the shoreline to understand what that might look like. So I really do, if I can say, a support of more research and advocacy through information sharing, as Member Clark and CAO Sharma has brought up.
Okay. Can you do me a favor, please, Member Fiore? Can you turn on your video? Then I'll be able to see you wave next time because your video is not on.
Most definitely. I'll wave physically, yes.
Yes, but I can't see you. Your video is not on.
Yeah, sorry. My internet connection's not excellent. So usually it just, the system.
Okay. Well, just shout out next. There you are. Just shout out next time is fine. So
Okay.
Those are your comments, and are any other comments you'd like to make?
No, I just wanted to share that piece that I really do support and encourage more research and advocacy from our part.
Okay, and I have one last speaker, and I think that was Member Rapley.
Yes, I just want to say that things are definitely changing and different than what has happened before. Now, my experience is mostly up on the Bruce Peninsula, East Side, Georgian Bay, Hope Bay. But going back and looking through all the records, like the storms have been so bad this year, they've wiped out big docks that have been there for 60 or 70 years. And there is a 30-year cycle. But there's much more that seems to be happening now, maybe due to the climate change, maybe due to water regulation and holding back water in Lake Superior, whatever. But I think we have to be cautious that it's going to be some time. Hopefully things will cycle down, but can we really count on that the way things are going? So I think we have to be cautious in what you approve. And that's all.
Okay, thank you. No other speakers. I have it down as Member Ingrao and Member Kaywell moved to receive it. Is there any opposition to receiving this presentation? With our thanks to staff for meeting with the group. Seeing none, it's carried. And I'm going to go to Member Cridlin, who discussed a motion earlier, and I apologize. Member Cridlin, I wasn't paying as good attention as I should. So would you like to introduce your motion, please?
Thank you. And again, I'm open for the edits that are going to be required from maybe the CAO. So I think what I've got here is a motion for staff to explore lake area erosion / monitoring and bring for opportunities and bring back a report.
Okay. CAO Chandra, do you want to, do we need to edit some of this, or are you happy with the way it's worded?
To you, Madam Chair, it's high enough that we can do what we want to do under this. So I'm fine with that, unless Darren has any suggestions.
Darren?
To you, Madam Chair. No, I think that's a very broad way of putting it, to allow us to just research and bring something back, by not saying at the next board meeting really is appreciated. Just give you a little bit of time.
No,
to do
that's
that.
fine. That's fine. So it's moved by Member Cridlin. I'm going to ask Member Bilsma, are you willing to second that? Yep, I hear a thumbs up. Any opposition? No. Seeing none, hearing none. Therefore, it's carried. Thank you, Member Cridlin. So now we're on to 7B, the consent item. This is report FA 3120, and this is the COVID-19 financial impact and recovery planning. This was to be provided under a separate cover. I'm going to go to Lise, who can answer any questions, but I don't have a report on this, so I don't know. Lise, maybe you can give us an overview, please.
Certainly. The report was sent out to you yesterday afternoon, is my understanding. From Grant. No, that's fine. Just to make sure that I just want to make sure everybody, everybody received it, I guess, would be my question. But anyway, I can.
Thumbs to everybody who received it. Anybody received this? Can you put your thumbs up?
Oh my.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give you a bit of. Certainly, it's it parallels in terms of format and such. The report that went to the board for the April timeframe. So this is information that takes us to the end of May in terms of financial impact. So the background and purpose of the report are essentially the same as they were with the last board meeting, basically to bring the board up to date with some of the key milestones that have taken place and some of the decisions that senior staff have made with regards to the COVID-19 response. So the key dates that are new in this report would include starting on the 2nd of June, Ontario extends the state of emergency to June the 30th. On the 5th, Long Beach and Chippewa Creek open for seasonal camping. Treetop trekking will open or is opened, pardon me, on the 12th of June. On the 15th, which is Monday of this week, Ontario announced phase 2 opening for Niagara and Hamilton. On the 19th, which is tomorrow, Benbrook, Falls Falls conservation areas will be open. At least that's our plan that we're proceeding with. On the 20th, additional amenities will open at seasonal campgrounds, largely washroom facilities. And if you have any questions in that regard, Adam is on the line, so he can certainly respond to any specific concerns. When it comes to financial implications, so high level, again, at the end of April, our revenue losses were $170,990. At the end of May, we're sitting at $298,408 for the month of May, pardon me, for a total revenue loss impact of $469,000, almost $400. Revenue gains, and this is where it differs from the April report, is that we have filed for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy for businesses, and that will net us for periods 1 and periods 2 a total of $336,343, which helps us offset some of those revenue losses. Just to advise this group that our revenue losses compared to the same period in 2019 were
Okay, Lise, you've just been muted, and I don't know if you did that by accident or someone else, a host did. So can you, thank you. Can you repeat that last sentence?
Certainly. I don't know. Okay. I'll try to keep my hands to myself.
Kids around?
No, my kids are in their 30s, so I don't have to worry about that.
And Jeffrey just told me it wasn't him.
All right. Okay, wage subsidy. So, so far for period 1 and period 2, we do qualify and meet the criteria for the wage subsidy program, and that will allow us to offset revenue losses to the tune of $336,000. We are looking at our eligibility for periods 3 and 4. As I understand, the feds have expanded that wage subsidy program to the end of August. We may not qualify if our revenue losses are below 30%. So sort of stay tuned for the next few periods. We have sought out and been granted some insurance credits against the automobile policy and the health insurance. They're small, almost $7,000, but every little bit counts. We have total avoided costs to the end of May of $95,000. We have included incremental costs, which involve PPE as well as other costs involved in working from home for some of the staff, to the tune of $10,459. So as of the end of May, we're looking at a budget pressure of $41,310, which is manageable at this juncture. We have also had some conversations at the senior staff have had conversations about how to mitigate that $41,000 budget pressure, and we can do some cost containment and defer some expenses in the balance of the year. So at this point in time, this is a manageable situation, our financial impacts. As far as recovery planning, I would ask Misty to give you a bit of an overview. Actually, let me take that back. Adam first for the phased opening of the parks and the return to work planning and health and safety. Misty is in a better position to address those.
Okay, thank you, Adam.
Good morning, everyone. Through you, Chair. Yeah, we're excited to open our 4 active parks this weekend. We will be charging admission at our 4 parks and including some amenities such as Bimbrook as we're opening the beach and splash pad, all discussed open through the provincial guidelines. So staff, we've gone through protocols with all our health and safety, and we're excited to open this weekend. So I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Just to let everybody know that all your videos disappeared on me, so I'm going to turn the meeting over to to the Vice Chair, Bruce Mackenzie's, and I'm going to get out of the meeting and come back in again, and then this happened once before with me. So Member Mackenzie, are you good to go?
Yes, Chair, I am.
Okay, so whoever's waving at you, they're the ones that get to speak. I think I had Member Rapley, but he's up and down all over, so I don't know if he was waving. I honestly don't know. I'm sorry.
No,
That was the only person. That was the only person I had on my list.
Yeah, I just had the window as a background, so I turned around in the room.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Vice Chair Mackenzie, it's Member Cridland.
Yes, go ahead, Member Cridland.
Oh, okay, so it's through you to Adam. Again, what we've seen locally is the swell of millions of people, I tend to exaggerate a bit, coming to our green spaces, which is really, really exciting, but pretty difficult to anticipate what we're going to see on a really nice weather day. So is there anything that you need from the board in anticipation of what might happen while we make the plans that I'm sure are fantastic at the moment, but good weather might further compromise limited staff, limited monitoring, limited enforcement. I can certainly speak locally that we've had some challenges, and I think other municipalities have as well. But before we end today, is there anything else you need from the board? Thank you.
Thank you for that. And through you, Chair, we don't. We actually are hoping that by opening our active park this weekend, it will mitigate some of the issues we have with other municipalities and other conservation authorities opening their parks as well. It will help spread everybody out. And by opening our active parks, we'll now be able to have more staff monitoring the areas. So we're hoping this is going to kind of take easy on some of the issues we've had in prior weeks.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. Member K-Wall, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Bruce. So this is for out of our operating budget, which I believe is about $12 million a year. It's my understanding about $2 million of that comes from what I would call self-generated revenues. We're approximately halfway through the year. So would it be fair to say that we're still anticipating probably at least $1 million worth of those self-generated revenues for the remainder of the year? The primary source being the Thanksgiving festival?
Through you, Chair, or Vice Chair, I guess. Member Kewell, the revenue impacts, the COVID revenue impacts have been almost exclusively in Adams area, so land operations. So effectively that $2 million. The report does speak to the fact that the festival contributes about $120,000 to that net surplus position that assists the authority in and reduces the regular levy. The festival is still a question mark, and given that, I think Adam can speak to it if necessary. He's looking at a change in format to make it more virtual, because there's some question as to whether the province will have relaxed regulations such to allow such a large gathering of the public. So if that does not happen, that is a pressure that may come to bear. You should know also that the seasonal campground, we have prorated the season so that we lost 3 weeks worth of revenue from that stream. The weddings that have been canceled and some of the educational programming as well. So the revenue losses to the end of May are largely front-ended, with the exception of the festival. I do need to put that out there. But a lot of the weddings that have been canceled for the balance of the year, we've captured all of that activity in May. So we're hoping at this juncture that the revenue losses will now start to decrease significantly. Will we realize the entire envelope from park operations to support the operating budget? No. Right now we're looking at a $41,000 shortfall of being able to apply for wage subsidy programs if the revenues fall below 30% of prior year levels.
So what I was, you're anticipating further revenues coming in, and I'm wondering if we have a plan or are doing any scenario planning on what kinds of measures you might have to take later in the year to offset those revenue losses, and whether any of those types of decisions, not the actual decisions, but the types of decisions the board should be aware of at this point in time. And when I say this point in time, I mean probably the next report that we get back on where we are on the financial plan. What I'm really getting at is if we have to make decisions that impact payroll, what types of decisions might those be? I think it'd be good for the board to have a heads up on the categories of decisions that might have to come to us later in the year. So that's all I was trying to get at.
Through you, Chair, if I may, the senior staff has certainly have had these conversations on a regular basis through every incident command team meeting that we have. Perhaps not every meeting, but certainly on a regular basis. We do have tracking documents and methodologies in place to for each department has brought forward thoughts and ways of mitigating any revenue losses and to minimize the impact on staffing. At this point in time, we have not laid off any staff, and the wage subsidy program has certainly facilitated allowing us to do that. So I'm happy to bring something back to the board. I just didn't want to do so prematurely if, at this juncture, the $41,000 shortfall is manageable and it can be offset through cost containment and other measures that senior staff have talked about on a regular basis. If those are the measures that you want us to report on with the next iteration of this pandemic reporting, I can certainly do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Lise. Chandra, did you want to say something? Okay. Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay.
Rob Foster here.
Go ahead, Member Foster.
So I thank, first of all, Lise, thank you very much for bringing this forward, and you know, it's, and yes, you've been able to track things to the end of May. Right at the current time at Niagara Region, we have been tracking to the end of June, and as well, we have a report coming in outlining what's going on to the end of this year. And there's a variety of assumptions that are going into it, including, you know, not particularly rosy things around revenue sources, etc. So, and actually, we're about to start into budget process at Niagara Region as well. So, I think we need going into the future here, you know, a projection, sort of worst case and best case scenario out to the end of the year. I think the NPCA needs to do it for their own peace of mind. I mean, you know, what happens if the Thanksgiving festival don't happen? What happens if, you know, a variety of these other revenue sources don't come into play? The commentary earlier, and I think Mr. Kaywall was bang on. It's that, you know, a lot of this revenue side of things is going to change quite dramatically. So anyway, may I suggest, and if, you know, for our next board meeting, that we perhaps have a bit of a prediction, you know, a crystal ball of some variety that's basically saying, here's best case, here's worst case going out to the end of the year, because, you know, 41,000 to mitigate is one thing. Considerably more than that, which I think you're really looking at for this year, may not be so easy to mitigate. So, thank you.
Thank you, Member Foster. Any other speakers? Okay.
Sorry, Vice Chair McKenzie.
Member Fior.
Just a quick comment on this, and maybe question for Lise through you is, and I am glad to hear that the layoffs have been avoided and that the wage subsidy has helped to reduce our loss. But has there been exploration of new revenue streams when doing this planning? I know it's important, obviously, to reduce our costs as much as possible, but given that many of our revenue streams have taken a hit this year, have we been able to identify new revenue streams to strengthen our financial position now and into the future?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Member Fior, I mean, we have been looking at a variety of subsidies and programs and grants and that type of thing to try to help offset. So the infrastructure funding, for example, anything through FedDev, that type of revenue stream. At this point, we haven't done, and Adam may speak to this, any business re-engineering to sort of look at taking on an entirely new sort of component of our business. We've certainly altered some of the concepts that we've worked with as far as our program. So Adam is looking at a virtual festival, for example, to try to mitigate. So we're looking at alternatives as they present themselves. Have we completely changed our business model? No, not at this juncture.
Thank you, Lise. Member Bilsma.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering if there, so just to tag on to what Member Fior was putting forward, is there any possibility that the foundation could make a contribution, given the kind of the emergency status? Is there any chance that they have some strength to be able to maybe put forward a fundraising? Conservation is important to members, perhaps some kind of charitable ask to stabilize the organization so we can do our important work. Is there anything maybe Member Foster or Madam CAO could comment? Is there any possibility from there?
Member Foster, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's highly unlikely, Dave. We've been going through quite a review of what the foundation is all about. and by the way, even with the mandate of the foundation, like if we're looking to do monies to handle operations, that's not part of the mandate of what's going on with the foundation. I mean, capital projects possibly, but anyway, there's an awful lot of things that it's a bit of a moving target at the moment that I think Chandra can also talk to. So thank you.
Thank you for entering that discussion. I'm satisfied with that.
Thank you. If there aren't any more first-time speakers, I'd like to call for a motion to receive this report. And we have a mover. I see Chair Johnson's back with us. I'll put the chair back to you.
Actually, you can finish it off if you want. Member McKenzie, actually, you were one of them. So why don't we do Member Bylsma and Member Metcalf, and that was to receive.
All right, everybody. So we have the motion on the floor. Anybody opposed? I see none, so that's approved. Thank you, and I'll put the chair back to Chair Johnson.
Thank you. Doing that shutting on and off really worked. Just also to let you know that Member Foster and Member Bylsma have to go to a 10:30 meeting, so they may be quietly exiting, and then you'll know why. So we're on to now report number FA 33-20. This is the land acquisition for Binbrook, and it's for $2. Anybody got a problem with that? So it's moved by Member Rapley and seconded by Member Shurton. Are there any opposition to buying $2 worth of road allowance? Seeing none, then it is carried. Thank you. So now we're on to discussion items. Report number FA 2920. This is 2020 Capital Contract Award for Long Beach Comfort Station. This is to be approved, and Adam will be able to answer any questions that you may have. I'm assuming everybody's read. So are there any questions for this item? Everyone else, please mute your...
Madam Chair.
Okay, yes, I've got Member Cridlin, then I have, I believe, was it you, Member Kaywall? Just thumbs up if you want to speak.
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you. All right, so everybody else mute. Member Cridlin, you're on first.
Thank you through you, Chair. Probably a really easy one through you to the to Lee's is just about how the HST component works when we do our budgets. So teachable moment. I see we've got 360 in the budget, but the total comes in at 4 and change. So thank you.
Through you, Chair. Certainly, it's we as an organization follow the for HST recovery. So basically, we get to recover all but 1.76% of the HST paid. So when we're doing budgeting or approvals by the board for various projects or operating expenses, we take the $100 and we add $1.76, and we come forward to the board with a request for an approval for $101.76.
Madam Member Cridlin? Good. Okay, thank you. Member Kaywell.
Thank you. So once the board approves this project, when do we expect construction to start? When do we anticipate it to be complete? And what I'm trying to determine, is this going to be in place to impact the 2020 camping season?
Thank you. Adam?
Through you, Chair, thanks for the question. This is slated to start construction after Labor Day weekend. It will not affect the 2020 camping season, but be ready for 2021.
Member Kaywell?
Thank you. So a couple of questions on the actual numbers. So in your report, you mentioned the $250,000, which was approved as part of the 2019 capital budget. Then in 2019, the board approved returning about $1 million of capital project levy to Niagara region. So is it correct to assume that no funds were received for this project in 2019?
Yeah, through you, Chair. This project was not included in the money that was taken away. This project remained funded in 2019.
Okay, so
Thank you, Member Kaywell.
so then in your note, you make the clarification. So I'd like some clarification. You say that the provision of $250,000 will be carried forward to 2020. So do you mean that the $250,000 is going to come from the 2020 capital envelope?
It was the 250,000 is a 2019 project that will be carried over. So from a lot of money in 2019 carried over to the 2020 season.
Okay. And the note also indicates that the project was approved by the board as part of the 2020 capital budget. But at the Audit and Budget Committee meeting in April, there was a discussion which was reported to the board in May that the Niagara region was unable to provide all of the funding that the board approved with respect to capital projects. So I get that there was part of the 2020 capital budget that was approved by the board, but have we reconciled yet which projects are going ahead and which projects are going to be delayed due to the lack of funding that we received from Niagara? And what I'm ultimately getting to is this project forward now, and if the funding has to be reallocated from other projects, I don't think we have a good line of sight into what those other projects are that we may be taking funding away from. So would that be a fair assessment as to how this may be treated?
Thank you, Adam.
I'll let Lise discuss that one.
Okay, super. Thank you, Lise.
Through you, Chair to Member Kaywell. Okay, so perhaps a little bit of clarification here. So the $250,000 that came from the 2019 envelope for capital projects, when the funds were not expended in 2019, the mechanics are that those funds go back to the reserve and then they are accessed from the reserve in 2020 for disbursement in the following year. The $110,000 that we added to that project in order to allow for the provision to be large enough to be able to complete this project, which is $360,000, that was approved as part of the 2020 capital projects. The $1 million that we had to pull back from the capital envelope in 2020, we do know exactly which projects were not funded as a result of that decision. And this project was not part of it. So senior staff met and hashed out which projects did not make the cut. This one did, given the business case was very strong in terms of health and safety and revenue generation and payback periods, all of that type of thing. And from that perspective, Adam, I'd flip it back to Adam to flesh that out for you. But at the end of the day, those dollars are, if the board wants a report on the projects that were that did not make the cut for the 2020 capital envelope, we're happy to do that for you.
Member Kaywell, do you want to give some of that direction?
Yeah, so I believe that request has already been made by the Finance Committee to see the results of those, and either at the July or the October meeting, we will see that coming back. You know, one of the concerns I have here is that, for example, I know that some of the building restoration projects for Balls Falls have been in the capital budget for the past couple of years, okay? And I would going to be a little bit challenged if we are moving ahead with a new comfort station at Long Beach when potentially building restoration projects have been put on hold for another year. So I'm quite happy to wait for that reconciliation to come forward to the Finance Committee when it does, but I think that will be important for the board to understand which projects are moving ahead and which projects are not moving ahead, because back in October last year, we approved all of them moving ahead. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Lise or Adam? Lise, you wanted to speak?
If I can, through you, Chair to Member Kaywell, A listing of the projects that were not funded was actually part of the report that went to the board, trying to remember, or to the Audit and Finance Committee, and now the Finance Committee. It was part of the Q2 board reporting in May. There we go. And it might not have been a list in detail, but it certainly, the appendix to that report did include a listing of projects that were not funded as a result of that $1 million clawback.
Are you okay, Lise, with resending that, please?
Oh, by all means.
Okay,
and I
thank
can
you.
certainly provide additional detail if that's the will of the board.
Thank you. Member Kaywell, are we all right now? Or do you have more questions?
I think he's frozen.
It's a whole new language now, isn't it? So until Member Kaywell, you're back. Thank you. Any other comments or questions, Member Kaywell? I think we're still freezing out here. There you are. Okay, thank you. Member Smith, I saw you waving frantically. Was that just to say hello?
It was hello and to ask a question also. I'm wondering if in this proposal we considered or planned for any green technologies or green innovation in the construction of this building.
So can everybody else please mute, and we'll just go to Adam. And that just helps with the sound, folks. That's all. It's not really to shut you out. Adam, go ahead.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. Part of the RFP process, there was a green technology proponent that they were all graded on. So it was part of the scoring and value. So I can share that.
Thank you, Member Smith.
No, thank you. I'm wondering, and again, and this may not be the place because you may not be prepared for it, Adam, but I'd be really interested in how that component works. And that might be for a report for our next board meeting so that better prepared. I don't know if it's a fair question at this point.
May I suggest that you and Adam take this offline, and if you feel that it requires a report or something that the rest of the board members would benefit from, then you can approach Chandra and we can put it on the agenda. How's that?
Beautiful. It's good to meet.
All right, everybody else is muted. Thank you very much. Is there any other comments or questions for Adam regarding this capital project? I'm not hearing or seeing anything. So I've got it down that it's moved by Member Steele and seconded by Member Smith, that the approval for the 2020 capital contract award for the Long Beach Comfort Station be approved. Any opposition? Seeing none. Now we're on to committee reports, folks. The first thing we need to do is receive the minutes for the governance committee meeting that was dated June the 8th, I believe, 2020. It's moved by Member Kaywell and seconded by Member Wright that we receive those minutes as a board. Are there any oppositions just to the minutes right now, folks? I'm not seeing any. So now we need to, thank you, that's carried. We need to go now. We have a couple of things that we need to have approved that were moved at the governance committee. The first one is the terms of reference and the 2020 work plan. And I have, hang on, I got to get my list out. Moved by Member B and seconded by Member Brady that the terms of reference and the 2020 work plan for the governance committee be approved. Any opposition, any discussion? Seeing none, thank you, it's approved. And now we're on to board training, and it's moved by Member Clark and seconded by Member Kuhn-Peterson that the board training, and there's amendment that was recommended by the committee. If you read your minutes, you would know. Is there any opposition to this? Seeing none, thank you. It's moved. And the last one for approval is the per diem and honorarium, the update. So that is moved by...
Sorry, Brenda.
Yes, sir.
It's Ken. So the amendment was adding the levy training?
Yep, keep going.
So no, that was my question. So you mentioned an amendment to the motion, It didn't say so specifically in the motion. It said so in the minutes, but I think the amendment was to add levy training as an additional education session. Am I correct in that?
I believe so. Grant or Chandra?
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you for
Okay, good.
pointing
Thank
that
you.
out, Ken. Sorry, I'm working on 5 different pieces of paper here, so thank you for pointing that out. And I have Member Fiore who would like to speak to it, please.
Hi, sorry. Sorry, I know I came in a little bit late trying to speak to the board training.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Would inclusivity, diversity and inclusivity fall under code of conduct, administrative bylaws? How can we maybe put some emphasis on that, especially to support the statement that we made on the website on June 15th?
Yep. Chandra, are you prepared to answer that?
It certainly good. Thank you, Member Fiore. It certainly fits under the code of conduct training, and as you know, our whole bylaw is scheduled to be brought back to the board and updated. And the plan is when that comes out, right after that, we will schedule a training of members on both the bylaw and components of the bylaw, so we can address that there. If there's a desire to do it separately, that can be arranged as well. But maybe next year, not this year.
No, thank you. And through you, Chair. And I do appreciate it being integrated rather than being maybe a separate one, but just some additional emphasis and focus on that. And then maybe sharing back with our stakeholders how we're staying true to that commitment of diversity and inclusivity in our watershed.
Thank you. I think that was taken as direction. Thank you. So I believe we did approve that, and we're on to the per diem and honorarium update, and it's moved by Member Cridlin and seconded by Member Fiore that we approve the per diem and honorarium update. Are there any discussion, any opposition? Hearing and seeing none, it's approved. Thank you, everyone. We're on to notices of motion. I am going to turn this over to Member Kaywell. This was, Member Foster, being the chair of the Governance Committee. This was a item that came up in the Governance Committee, and it's a recommendation. So we've put it into a motion form that it needs 2/3 the vote because it's considered a reconsideration on a previous motion we made about delegation. So Member Foster or Member Kaywell, who would like to speak to this?
Well, I'll start, Member Johnson. So, yeah, we had a very good discussion at our governance committee meeting about how our meetings, etc., are going, and sort of in this new reality of being online, we do have to provide input from the public on various things, and so we need to figure out how we're going to be doing this appropriately. But our thought process of governance is that it's, we've delayed this a while, so now it's time to figure out how we're going to be doing this and get moving with it in the near future. So anyway, I happen to think it's a good idea, and staff can Grant and staff can work to make this happen. So thank you.
Thank you. So Member Kaywell, the way that we do it at City of Hamilton, I just want to see if we're doing it properly here, and Grant can just chime in anytime he wants. So Member Kaywell, I would like you to present your motion for reconsideration. Then we need to, in my opinion, we need to make a vote to waive the rules to move it from being a notice of motion to a motion. So I want to get that out of the way first, but I first want you to read off the motion so everybody understands why we want to waive the rules, and secondly, what the time sensitivity on it is. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Chair. So the motion I'd like to bring is that provision number 3 of the resolution FA 38-20 with respect to written delegations only at online board meetings of the board be brought forward for reconsideration.
Thank you. So you are moving and seconded by Chair Foster of the Governance Committee to waive the rules so that this is not a notice of motion, it becomes a motion. Is there any discussion on this for the waiving of the rules?
Madam Chair, if I may interrupt.
I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, Grant, go ahead.
Our procedural bylaw or our administrative bylaw provides that provision of recommendations within minutes constitutes a notice of motion. So you're safe to just bring forward the actual reconsideration. So in effect, there are three motions that will be passed here. One is to bring forward the matter for reconsideration, which requires a 2/3 majority, and then a vote on the clause that is being reconsidered. And then if that is that clause is defeated, then the subsequent motion proposed by Member K-Wall comes forward. So there's three motions bringing forward for reconsideration, the original motion, and then what you're going to do.
Okay, so we need a vote on reconsideration first.
And actually, Gina can project it onto the screen. I think it's slide number 12, 13, and 14, and that'll walk us through each.
That's beautiful. So everybody, Chair Grant is now going to take over. Just so we don't monkey this up. So go ahead, Grant. And Gina, can you put on the slide, please? Okay, sorry, Grant, it's not there, but go ahead. Oh, there it is. Okay, great. Thank you, Gina. Go ahead, Grant. So this is the one we are going to vote on first, that provision number 3 of resolution FA 3820 with respect to written delegations only at online meetings of the board be brought forward for reconsideration.
And this requires a 2/3 vote. Now, I know we were going to lose some of our members as well.
Let's do a roll call. Let's do a roll call right now, then we'll know what 2/3 means.
Sure. So we have Member Johnson present. Do we have Member Bedu?
Yes.
Member Brady? Member Brady, are you there? He's gone.
He was jumping all over the place.
Okay. Member Bilsma?
Approved.
Okay. Member Clark?
Yes.
Member Kuhn-Peterson? Member Kuhn-Peterson, are you there? Okay. Member Cridland?
Here.
Member Fior?
Here.
Member Foster?
Yes.
Member Halinga?
Here.
Member Houston is not here. Member Ingrail?
Here.
K-Wall?
Yes.
Member McKenzie?
Yes.
Member Metcalf?
Present.
Member Rapley?
Yes.
Member Shurton? Member Shurton, are you there? Member Smith?
Yes.
Member Steele?
Here.
Member Woodhouse? And Member Wright?
Yes.
Okay, so we have an attendance, 1, 2.
Thank you. So now we need a 2/3 reconsideration vote. So we need to do a roll call again, please, Grant, and get everybody's vote.
Okay, so we have 16 members present. With 2/3 of 16. How's our
Let's
math
see who
doing?
votes first. We'll worry about the math later.
Sure enough. If you're in favor of this recommendation, please say yay. If you're not, please say nay. Member Johnson.
No, say no. It makes it easier.
No will work. Member Johnson.
A.
Okay. Member Bedu. Is that a yes?
No.
No Member Brady. Member Bilsma. Member Bilsma?
I think he had to leave.
Okay. Member Clark.
Okay.
Grant, sorry to interrupt. Member Brady is back on the screen.
Okay, great.
Member Brady, are you in favor of the above motion? Okay, we'll come back to him. Kuhn-Peterson. He's not present.
Yeah.
Member Cridland. Member Fior,
Yes.
Member Foster,
Yes.
Member Halinga,
Yes.
Member Ingrail,
Yes.
Member K-Wall,
Yes.
Member McKenzie,
Yes.
Member Metcalf,
Yay.
Member Rapley, Rapley? Okay. Member Shurton, Member Shurton, not here. Member Smith,
Yes.
Member Steele,
Yes.
Member Woodhouse, not present. Member Wright.
Yes.
All right, the motion for reconsideration has passed.
Thank you. So we're now into reconsideration. Gina, can you please put up the second motion we need to find? So this is the original motion, I believe, and we have to now vote it down in order to get the other one to come up, right?
Correct.
Okay, so this was the original motion. We basically have to consider it null and void, or do you still want to hold it?
Certain.
Thanks, Rob.
The meeting.
Oh, he's left. Okay. So that in declared state of emergency, unless under extenuating circumstances is otherwise determined by the chair in consultation with the CIO, secretary, treasurer, any and all delegations to the board shall only be in written form. If we want to change this, you have to now vote no. If you want to keep it the same, you vote yes. Am I correct, Grant?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, so we have to do, I would really like to do another roll call on this one, please.
Okay. Do you want a roll call or a recorded vote?
Sorry, a recorded vote. I apologize. And you're going to say me first. I vote no. That's where right? I don't. Yeah, I want to change this, so it's a no.
Okay. Member Beatty.
No.
Member Brady. Okay, I think he's having some technical difficulties. Member Billsma is gone.
Voted no. He just chimed in with chat. Sorry, because he's listening on the phone. So he just chimed in with chat. Go ahead.
Member Clark.
No.
Okay. Member Kuhn Peterson. No, she's not there. Member Cridland.
No.
Member Fior.
No.
Member Foster.
I believe he went for his meeting as well.
Member Halinga.
No.
Member Ingrail.
No.
Member K-Wall.
No.
Member McKenzie.
No.
Member Rapley. Oh, sorry, Member Metcalf.
No.
Member Rapley.
No.
Member Shurton. They're gone.
Meeting.
Okay, Member Smith.
No.
Member Steele.
No.
Member Woodhouse not present. Member Wright. Member Wright.
No.
Okay, so this motion is in front of you is now defeated.
Thank you. Now, Gina, can you put up the last motion? If you're in favor, this is it's not a turnaround now, that in the declared state of emergency when electronic meetings are convened, unless under extenuating circumstances, as otherwise determined by the chair and in consultation with the CIO, secretary, treasurer, any and all delegations to the board shall be in the form of a written submission or written submission as well as presentation by video link. Thank you. So because we got the presentation up there and I can't see everybody opposing, we should just do one more vote and we'll be finished with 9 committee reports. So can we do the vote, please? My vote is yes.
So, did you need a mover for this, Chair? Because it's Ken. I'm quite happy to move this. So.
I believe I had you, and that's a good question because now Member Foster has left. So Ken, you're going to move this, and I believe I had Member Smith seconding it.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so go ahead, Grant, one last vote.
Okay, I believe you said you were in favor, Member Johnson?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Member Beatty? Member Beatty? All right, we'll come back to him. Member Brady?
Brady says yes on chat.
Okay. Member Billsma? Gone, right? Okay. Member Clark?
Yes, I support this motion because it actually gives the chair the authorities under extenuating circumstances to make some changes if necessary. So I think this meets all of our requirements.
And Member Kuhn-Peterson, are you there? All right. Member Cridland?
In favor?
Member Fior?
In favor.
Member Foster? Gone? Gone. Member Halinga?
Yes.
Member Ingrail?
In favor, yes.
Member K-Wall?
Yes.
Member McKenzie?
Yes.
Member Metcalf?
Yes.
Member Rapley?
Yes.
Member Shurton? Not there. Member Smith?
Yes.
Member Steele?
Yes.
Member Woodhouse? Still not present. Member Wright? Member Wright?
Yes.
Yeah. And Member Beatty? We're coming back to you. Member Beatty? Okay. Motion passes, and of course, we will update our administrative bylaw to reflect this new direction when it comes forward in the fall.
Thank you very much, everyone. And aren't you grateful that we're not doing this after every item in our agenda? So thank you. It's carried. New business. Anybody have any new business before we go into closed session? And Gina, do you mind taking the presentation off, please, so we can go back to our panel? You're wonderful. Thank you. So seeing no new business right now, I'd like to remind the public. Oh, sorry.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I'm delayed in hitting unmute. If just one thing, it's not necessarily new business, but I would just like to extend my thanks to the staff through this whole process of opening up with different phases and having to adjust day to day, and still seeing that our areas are able to open and to accommodate the public in the best fashion possible. So my hat's off to staff for having to be innovative and being there. Thank you.
Well said. And I think everyone agrees. Okay, so I'd like to remind the public that we will be proceeding into closed session to talk about an individual staff members, and the recording will stop and will not resume after closed session, but that the meeting will adjourn in open session immediately after we finish with closed session without any direction coming out of camera. So I need a mover, don't I, Grant? Because it's not my roadmap. I need a mover and seconder to go into closed session because it involves personal matters about identifiable individual, including NPCA employees. So I would like to, how about we get Member Cridland and Member Fior? Anyone opposed? Thank you. And also to let everybody know too, that Member McKenzie and Member Clark have a NEC meeting, and they may have to chime out in the middle of all this. And also I'd like to all staff members, please leave the meeting except for Grant and Misty and Chandra.
Okay, I'm stopping the recording now.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And if everybody wants to take Gina.
Goodbye, everyone.
Folks, a 5-minute break, if you don't mind, please. I need a nature break. And